Okay, welcome to the tutorial presentation on the 3x vocal tonality technique. And what this is all about is speaking, enunciation. It's about the sound of your voice, but not the sound of your voice as far as the physical sound of your voice, but how your voice projects, and tricks to make everything work better, okay? Whether it's projection, whether it's energy, whether it's punctuation of certain words, elongation of certain words, all these are techniques, and they're very easy to apply once you see these little codes that we've developed that in a script, you can just underline a certain word, you'll bold a certain word, so you'll know what to do when you see that. And not only that, but we'll talk about how to speak in general. In other words, a lot of people, when they read in a very stiff way. They read as if they're reading, just the words basically are just laying on the page. We're going to help you lift those words off the page just by doing silly little things that work like a charm for anyone. And with a little bit of practice, and we'll tell you what to do for practice, you'll be ready to go with this. And the goal here is not only to sound better, it's to sell better. Because a lot of these techniques are psychological in nature. Just like a lot of the course that you just went through was psychological in nature, so are these techniques, and some of them are very, very powerful. So first of all, what is vocal tonality? What do I mean by that? Well, these are techniques for reading your video sales letter with specific vocal inflections that aid in the psychology of making the sale. Vocal inflections are very powerful things. And most people, when they read, if you'll notice, especially if you notice someone that's reading from a pre-written speech, if you'll watch a president give an address, or if you'll watch an accomplished speaker give a speech, you'll notice that they're not speaking every word at the same pace. They're not speaking every word with the same punctuation of power, of inflection. All of this changes. And good speakers do it naturally. But I don't believe that you need to be a good speaker to make a great video sales letter. You just need to know a little bit of tricks. First of all, punching. Sounds violent, doesn't it? But it's not. What does punching mean? Well, punching a word simply means that you give it emphasis over the other words on a given slide or slides. Now, here's an example. I'm going to give you examples throughout this tutorial of words of a phrase that will have no punctuation whatsoever, and then or punching whatsoever, or elongation whatsoever, and then words that do. And I'll show you how it works. So the real truth behind success is, now that's how I would read that if I wanted no emphasis, no punctuation, and in this case, no punching, because notice there was no word that stood out above the rest. I said the real truth behind success is, and if people were reading this poorly, if one was to read this poorly, one might say, the real truth behind success is, well, at this point, you're going to put somebody to sleep. So this is where this comes in handy. Even if you were to read it as poorly as I just did, if I said the real truth behind success is, so now that's not how well I want you to read. I want you to read better than that, but taking a really crappy reading and just punctuating that word real. And notice the word real is bold. Now, I want to make a very clear distinction here. I'm going to give you tricks on how to do this in a script. This is not how you would do it in a video sales letter. In other words, you might bold different words in a video sales letter than you would read them. You may make a certain word red because it's subliminal. We've gone through subliminal highlighting techniques in the 3X toolbox. What we're doing here is strictly for a script. So think of this as a script outside of slides, outside of your video sales letter. In fact, you can't use a lot of these techniques within your video slides because they would just look like odd characters, as you'll soon see. So for punctuation, I simply bold the word. So if I wanted to read this for real, I would say the real truth behind success is, and all I'm doing is emphasizing the word real. The real truth. And you can raise your voice, or you can say the real truth. It's almost like you're just punching something. That's why it's called punching. So that's all there is to punching. And you hear it all the time. You hear it all the time throughout really good sales letters and in really good speeches as well. So that the flat way, it's actually a good idea to practice reading something flat. The real truth behind success is, well, to kind of get to your ear used to hearing what would put someone to sleep. And if you just raise the energy just a little bit on that sentence and say, the real truth behind success is, even that sounds better, right? But we'll go one step further. We'll keep the energy high. I'll give you a cool tip for keeping energy high at the end of this tutorial. But now we're going to punch the word real. The real truth behind success is, notice my voice just went up when I said real. That's enough of a punch. So that's punching. It's as easy as that. And in your text document, you simply bold the words you want to punch. I'm going to show you how to combine these as well, so as we go further into the tutorial. Now, here's some words that you might want to consider punching. There's no really right or wrong words, but there's some really wise choices. Any power words, you've got a whole list of power words and power phrases within 3X tutorials, so go check those out. But by, now, real, plus, those kind of words are great words to punctuate. So if I'm going to say, you're going to get this and this and this plus, I'm going to punch that plus, right? You would just bold that in your text document. Feeling words, any words that deal with feelings, senses, see, when we're talking about like when desire is a great word to punch. Any of feeling words you can take your pick and you can punch them. It doesn't mean that you punch them in every single slide, by the way. So don't get carried away here and make every slide, every slide's going to have these crazy, all these tonality techniques. You just want to use these sparingly, and you want to use these in certain places. As long as your energy is high through your slides, when you do use these, it'll just leap out and it will be enough to get the point across. Now, like I said, there are no wrong answers as which words you want to decide to punch or elongate. This is kind of your style, and you should find your own style when it comes to your reading. It's your personal taste. But the words that I do recommend people punching are those power words and feeling words. Those are really good places to start. You may find that there are other places to start as well. Like when you're telling your nightmare story, you may punch some element that has nothing to do with a power word. Like if something happened bad for you in a kitchen, you may say, and believe it or not, all this happened in the kitchen. Okay, I'm just punch the word kitchen. Well, obviously, I can't put kitchen in the list of words to punch, right? So you have to find your own words to punch, but it kind of comes as common sense as you read your story. Where's the dynamic? Where's the emphasis? Where would if I was telling this story to my best friend and I was really animated about it, where would I emphasize these words? And that's where you want to emphasize the punch or by bolding inside your script. So that's punching. Let's get on to elongation. Elongation is a word or a phrase that is simply enunciated slower than the words, and I just did it, enunciated slower than the other words on a slide to add dramatic effect. It doesn't just add dramatic effect, however, it does something else. Psychologically, it allows the user's mind to engage. And this is very, very important. So here's an example. I can read the very first one, normal. The secret is called caloric staggering. Okay, there's very little inflection. I just went up on staggering a little bit. Versus this. The secret is called caloric staggering. Notice how I just slowed this down, okay? And all you do to denote that you want to do that in your script is to underline the word. Now, again, this is a text document. You wouldn't necessarily do this in your video sales letter, your actual VSL. But in your text document, simply underline the words that you want to, this should say, by the way, underline the words you want to elongate, not punch, excuse me. And you combine those, you can combine techniques, by the way. You combine techniques throughout and I do it all the time, throughout your script. You should combine techniques. So in this particular example, notice there's a power word right at the start called secret. It's the secret power word. So I'm going to combine the two, and it's going to sound like this. The secret is called caloric staggering. You see how that works? So instead of saying the secret is called caloric staggering, I say the secret is called caloric staggering. Now all I've done is punch secret and elongate caloric staggering. See how that works? Okay, elongation words you want to consider. Basically, there's phrases that are specific to benefits. For example, what I just used, caloric staggering, was actually in my USP. That is the driving force. That is the driving force behind why my USP's primary benefit works. So naturally, I want to elongate that. That is a huge part of my video sales letter. So your driving force should definitely be elongated. But any phrases specific to benefits, complex or vital terminology. Like if I say, now this is a process called thermogenesis. Now, what does that mean? So that's how I would say if I said thermogenesis, or if I said biomolecular individuality. Okay, if I'm going to say something that complex, I'm going to slow it down for sure. So if I read biomechanical biomolecular individuality, that would sound really bad, right? Everybody's probably shaking their head that's watching this video right now. I hope that you are shaking your head saying, that is very poor. That is very bad. So anyway, words prior to action words, like really, definitely, specifically. These are great words to elongate. So if I'm going to I'm going to say, okay, there are 3 foods that you want to avoid. Specifically, I want you to avoid blank, blank, blank. So now I draw that out. And you want to definitely avoid blank, blank, blank. And those are all, the whole definitely, what I just did there is I kind of punched and elongated. So if I was going to do that, what would I do in my Word document? I would bold and underline the word definitely. See how you can combine these techniques? And they're very simple. In fact, the next is called the strategic pause. Now, this is pausing for a few seconds, and it can serve as a pattern interrupt without using any images, without using any fancy words, any curiosity words like we talked about. There's 2 different types of pattern interrupts. There's the image interrupt and there's the verbal interrupt. This is neither. A pause in the action is a pattern interrupt. And I will use this all the time in specific places. I will use it after using the word right or deal, something that requires a split-second agreement on the part of my reader. And I will use it after making a very, very important statement that I really, really want to sink in. Okay, those are the 2 places that I use this technique. So here's an example. Now notice I'm using multiple tricks in this in this example just to show you how you can combine this in a real script. The strategic pause is 3 dashes. Now you can use 6 dashes, you can use anything you want. I use 3 dashes in my Word document. So let's look below, let's look at the second sentence first. We've got the very first word is what? It's punched. The phrase in the morning is what? Elongated, because it's underlined. After it's underlined, notice there's a strategic pause. It means I'm going to pause for 1 to 2 seconds. And I'm also going to punch the word this. So this is all in one sentence. Now, again, you don't need to do this in every slide. These are just the very, very important slides. So if I read the top sentence, and I would read it normally, I would say, never eat starchy carbs in the morning. This allows you, that's kind of how you would read it normally. Now listen to the difference. Never eat starchy carbs in the morning. This allows you see the difference? It sounds like I'm like a professional reader. Kind of am, but anyone can duplicate what I just did. All I did was punch never eat starchy carbs in the morning. Okay, so I just elongated that in the morning. And then I paused after it. So never eat starchy carbs in the morning. This and it feels almost uncomfortable to do, to pause for 2 seconds. But you need to do that after a vital, important statement, okay? Like I want them to understand that in my particular book, I don't want them to eat starchy carbs most of the time in the morning, okay? So I will say in the morning. I'll let that sink in so they go, really? I want them to think, really? Or that's interesting. If you just read through it, if I was to go, never eat starchy carbs in the morning, because this allows you to, well, they didn't see how that skips right over the main point? It doesn't allow it to sink in. If I say never eat starchy carbs in the morning, and I wouldn't say this allows you to. I would say something to the effect of, if you do this, you'll blank, but I'm just giving you examples here on the tutorial. But you get the point. I've combined 3 different elements here and I've punched 2 different words. But the elongation, very important here, and the strategic pause, crucial. Again, that's 3 dashes. And this allows the prospect to digest that information. And from a psychological point of view, it really does prompt him or her to agree with you. It really does. If you give someone a little bit of a pause, they tend to start nodding their head. This has been shown in study after study and looking at body language. If you say something, you go, now look, this is really, really important. I want you to save $1 a day. And you'll watch people's heads start going yes the longer you pause. It's kind of an interesting effect. So this is what we want to do in your video sales letter. Now, the last technique that we're going to talk about is not so much a technique, but a way of reading. I call it the everyman voicing or everywoman voicing for those of you who are ladies. And this simply means that you want to read your video sales letter in a natural, smooth, conversational style and tone, rather than being rigid or focused on being perfect. Everyone knows the mantra by now. If you're watching this video and you don't know the mantra, please go back and check out the mantra of progress, perfection. Big difference there, right? Perfection is the enemy of progress. So this is the same thing is true here when you're reading your script. If you're trying to read your script and sound like you're reading, It's not going to sound natural. You want to read your script in a way that sounds completely smooth, conversational style reading. That does mean that you can make some mistakes. Imperfections in video sales letters can make you come across as more genuine. Too many, and you sound like an amateur. I just critiqued a video sales letter not too long ago by a girl doing a fitness product, and she made so many mistakes that it just sounded totally unprofessional. And this is something that's very easy to correct. You just stop during the recording process, and you give yourself 5 seconds, like you'll see in the videos. If you haven't watched them already, please do, on how to record your VSL. But when you stop for 5 seconds, you can see the timeline, and you can just simply edit that out, read the slide again, and just keep going. But too many mistakes, bad idea. But a few mistakes and a few ums and buts, which you hear me make all the time, not going to kill you. In fact, it's going to make you sound more human. And that's what people want. Now, I'm going to give you a good trick right here and now. This is why I want you to be paying attention to what I'm saying as well as what you're reading, because this is not on the slides. A great way to read a video sales letter is to practice reading it in front of your best friend. I kind of give you that tip later, but I'm going to get real specific here. Take your script and read it as if you were talking to your best friend. It really helps to have your best friend in the room. So, in other words, you're selling your best friend on this. If you're selling your best friend on something, you would not say, "Hi, I am Beth, and I have a really, really awesome thing to share with you. I think that you will make lots of money if you follow my suggestions. Look, this is a fish." Right? I mean, that's just going to put your best friend to sleep, and they're going to be wondering, what the hell are you doing? This is not how you talk. But if you talk like you're talking to your best friend, it would sound totally different. Passion would come out of your voice. Compassion would come out of your voice. Excitement, if you really believe this would change their life or help them make money or help them, pick a better place to go on vacation or whatever it is that your product or service does. This is how you want to think about reading your video sales letter. You will go from complete amateur to sounding almost like a pro just by doing this one trick, by reading it in front of your friend. Do that first. And I've actually had clients that would read and record their VSLs with their best friend in the room. They would say, "Please just stay here for an hour while I do this," because it's like I can look. Just feeling you in the room makes me feel more comfortable. Whatever it takes. I'll give you a few more tricks here later on. So, in fact, I'll give you a few more tricks right now. The first time VSL recorders, here's what I like to suggest that you try. Read and record standing up. And the reason why is because the energy level will double. If you're standing up and you're not an accomplished speaker, like if you're not used to speaking in front of a microphone, into a microphone, stand up. Energy will automatically go up. And when your energy goes up, your passion goes up. And when your passion goes up, you convey those feelings of I'm talking to something about something I love, and I'm talking more to a friend than I am reading a script. This is how people who read scripts read. It's called reading through the script. You're seeing the words on the screen and you're getting the feelings of the words. It's like reading music, but you're not reading every little word. And for those who think that they can't do this, how many do you, for example, how many people do you know that read one letter at a time? No one. No one who can read reads one letter at a time. It's the same thing when you're reading words. The next step to reading words to sound more fluent is the same step as reading letters when you were a little kid. You don't spell out first time, unless you can't read. When you can read, you just see first-time VSL recorders. You just read right through it. And it's the same thing on the next level. When you want to read through and over the script, you can do this. Practice this whole thing, and it starts by standing up. Actually, I think you should start by talking to your best friend and reading it in front of your family or best friend. Then record standing up. Keep that energy high. Second thing, consider recording only a few slides at a time. This can be daunting if you're looking at 250 slides in a video sales letter and you're thinking, I'm going to have to record all 250. It's funny because you're a little nervous, even though there's maybe no one in the room, but you're still a little nervous. Well, consider just a few slides at a time. Say, I'm going to read the first 5 slides. I'm going to stop. And what's really cool is if you follow my instructions in the videos talking about how to do this in Camtasia and ScreenFlow, I use ScreenFlow. You could literally record a few slides at a time, take a minute break if you want to, slide up, start reading again, because you'll see that gap in ScreenFlow, and then all you got to do is just erase that gap. or Camtasia, whatever you want to use. Same exact principle. So if this is bothering you, if this is something that you feel like that you're not going to be, I'm going to be a little nervous with it, I'm not going to be fluent with it, just take a few slides at a time and rehearse those few slides and press record, and then pause, record, rehearse it again, and keep going. Now, like I said, practice reading your VSL in front of friends and family. That's something I highly suggest that you do. And here's another one. Ignore the sound of your voice and just focus on the techniques, and you're going to do great, because a lot of people hate the sounds of their own voice. They do. I mean, sometimes when I hear my voice, I go, ugh, and I've got a decent speaking voice, but a lot of people think that they have a horrible voice. And I learned this technique from working in the music industry for many, many years. I used to be a professional musician, and a lot of singers would refuse to listen to their playbacks. They would sing, and they would, they obviously have to listen to themselves when they sing, but they refuse to listen to themselves on tape. They just wouldn't do it. It would mess with them. Okay, so I'm like, whatever, you sing great, but they're hearing all the little bitty imperfections. It's the same reason why certain actors will never go see their own movies, or certain. I know people that are in my business now as doing the fitness stuff. I will rarely look at my own photos. I don't like to do that. So if I'm shooting a photo for some magazine, I don't want to see myself. So just take the picture. I'll take your word for it. It looks great, because it can mess with me. And so the sound of your own voice can mess with you, and it can mess with you enough to where you sound insecure when you're reading. So the best thing to do is just not even think about it. Don't think about having to listen to the sound of your own voice. It is only in your head. Well, if you're thinking you're hearing something like, I sound too tinny, I sound too deep, I'm sounding this, as far as a sound, I'm talking about the literal physical sound of your voice. Chances are you are imagining things, unless you have an absolutely horrendous voice. And then ask your friends and family that if that's true. And if that's true, just consider finding a friend to read your video sales letter. You don't need a professional. You need someone who can read, someone who can follow these techniques. Okay, let's conclude this by giving you a few more pieces of advice. First of all, I don't want you to feel the need to include these techniques on every slide. Don't do that. Just use them, say 10 or 20 slides. Take 10 or 20 slides. Think of the slides that you really think are important, like the tips. Think of your number when you introduce a tip, when you introduce the name of your product, when you're talking about the benefits, maybe the guarantee. It's definitely during your nightmare story. Those kind of places. Find those places and start there. And then take the everyman approach to read the rest of the video sales letter. So don't worry about having to read every single slide with some trick to it. And please don't become obsessed over which word or phrase to use as a specific technique. The key to success is to simply find the words that feel natural to you and punch those words, or elongate those words, or pause after those words, whatever feels natural to you. And you can get some advice from friends. Say, oh, you know what you should do? You should pause there. And above all, this is probably the most important. Have fun. Have fun with this. Be yourself. The more you can be yourself, the more you can talk just energetically and passionately while you're being yourself. Think of putting yourself in the best possible state where you're the most passionate, but you're also being yourself. You're not on a soapbox. You're not reading as if you're rigid. You're just being yourself, but with energy. That's what standing up and thinking through these techniques can help you do when you record. And that alone will set you apart from just about every sales page on the internet.